But thank you everyone for coming today. We've got Jane
Thank
here
you.
to talk about a really interesting topic that I'm hugely looking forward to. So it's how to get unstuck and end persistent avoidance, which I
Hmm.
think we can all relate to. So,
Yes.
so yeah, I'm not going to give a big intro. Over to you, Jane, to tell us a bit more about
Okay.
yourself and why this is your topic of choice.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm Jane Elliott, as you will have heard, and you can probably also hear that I'm not from the UK. I'm originally from the States, and I came over here for an academic job about 20 years ago. And I still sound like I just left Michigan yesterday, apparently. My accent has not really changed. Um, And I started off teaching at the University of York in the north. So I came from Philadelphia to York. That was kind of an interesting segue. And now I teach at King's College in London. And along with that, I am also a coach. And I coach high achieving people who struggle to do things that they also know they want to do. So this can be on the micro or the macro level, and frankly, is often both. So it can be things like I still haven't gotten those pictures from the last trip framed, and they've been sitting on the side table for 3 years. But it can also be things like I know I should be looking for a higher level job, and I keep not doing it. And in what those two things have in common, despite their difference in scale, is that they both feature something you actually know you want to do. You want the results, but something is keeping you from actually going after it. And so that's really the problem that I solve. And I got into this because of mentoring as a professor, really. So one of the things I do is I supervise PhDs. I help people write their PhD thesis. And there was a point where I realized that almost 50% of the students that I'd supervised had won a faculty-wide thesis prize, right? Which is, I mean that's like all the disciplines.
Mm-mm.
And it was kind of a crazy stat. And of course, my students are completely brilliant and deserving, but so are my colleagues. And I sort of realized that one of the things that made my students more successful was that I helped them with the struggle of work, not just the content, but the struggle,
Mm.
right? Because I really want to do this thing. And also, when I sit down to try to do it, I feel like I'm coming out of my skin. Like that is basically the PhD in a nutshell. I mean,
Yeah.
that was pretty much why it took me 5 years, right?
It always seems very arduous. Anyone that I've seen
Yes,
do it, it looks very
exactly.
arduous.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But it's really, it's like anything where you want the result and you believe you're capable of the work, or at least part of you does, but something makes it too difficult to really engage. So I wanted to start doing that for more people than just my PhD students. And when I started writing and kind of opened up my coaching practice, I found that the problems are pretty consistent across what I would call, high achievers, though some people don't identify that way, but you could also just say smart, ambitious people who have a sense that they have skills they want to use, and often also have a sense that they haven't really done that as much as they could yet. That there is more in them that could or should come out, and they're sitting on it for whatever reason.
yeah.
Um, so I've found that there's kind of four different ways this manifests. And I actually have a quiz, which I'll put the link to it in the chat later so you can take it. It's very short. It's like 5 questions, but um, and the quiz basically identifies the ways that people get stuck. So it's sort of it's not your personality type. It's more like your avoidance style.
Okay.
Um, so the first one are the over deliverers. And over deliverers are the people who always do everything. They always do everything right. They have trouble taking time off. No one can clean the bathroom to their standards except them, right?
Yeah.
And someone asked me once if they're workaholics, and it's not necessarily. It's one of my clients who I kind of really recognize this type in. She wasn't a workaholic. She just worked really hard and raised chickens and had an organic garden and surfed and, right?
Just a lot going on.
The over deliverer, yes. And
Yeah.
over deliverers they often avoid time off. They
Right.
struggle with fun.
Hmm.
They struggle with downtime because all of that activity is helping them avoid something.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so if you are not this type, you may have encountered one. Then there are the spin cyclers, and these are people who avoid by learning something new. So they like to, you know, put down one thing, pick up another thing. Sometimes it's people with ADHD, but it doesn't have to be, you
Mm.
know, this when I've seen this in lawyers in the States, it's often someone like and for Americans, it's often someone who went to law school after three other careers, like, well, then I got my PhD in microbiology, then I decided to go to law school, right? That kind of person.
Yeah.
Um, but and these people, like some of that moving around, like there's nothing wrong with trying different things and being like curiosity driven, but the spin cyclers tend to avoid by picking up something new.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
when some things start, when they start to reach a point where they don't want to go forward with something or it's becoming uncomfortable, then it's on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
definitely have seen some people's CVs where
yeah,
serial sort of academics going across a range of subjects and but never quite getting to the
yeah,
let's get a job stage.
exactly. Yeah. I wonder if you would have seen that too when people looking for jobs when, you can sort of hear that their satisfaction window is fairly short with each new activity, right?
Sure, yeah, yeah. On to the next thing, like you say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Okay. And then there is the upper limiter, and these are people who are really resistant to exposure. I like to say that they're caught between like a fear of unhiding, a fear of appearing, and a fear of missing out. Right. So they're constantly wishing they could be bigger, wishing they could do more. But then when it looks like they might get to the point where this could happen, they sort of close back down. And upper limiters tend to avoid by deferring to experts. So asking for advice, taking a training,
yeah. Mm-mm.
assuming someone else knows better, anything that kind of keeps them in that studenty position.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And the procrastination through training and even personal development is definitely a thing for sure. And then the last type are the white knucklers. And this was my type for sure, which is the difference between a white knuckler and an over deliverer is that the white knucklers are doing the stuff. They're maybe doing almost as much, but they have no sense. Like the over deliverer knows they're crushing it. They just don't understand why it's not helping, like why they still feel miserable.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas the white knuckler knows they're miserable, but they think that they're constantly about to fail. So their entire career is like walking a tightrope,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
At
Even when
any
they're over delivering, they still feel that they're not
Exactly. Yeah.
achieving.
And
Yeah.
there are probably a lot of every white knuckler has at least a couple people around them who are really tired of saying, but you're really smart, but you're really good at this. I don't understand why you can't see this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was once talking to a woman on a consult and she really wanted to do my program, but she was like, I just don't know if my husband will go for it. And she had a lot of trouble believing she was really intelligent enough for her role. And
Mm-mm.
so she said, would you talk to him? And I said, well, of course I'm happy to talk to him, but in the meantime, maybe just ask him this question, like how much would it be worth to him if he never had to try to reassure you that you're intelligent enough again? And she was like, oh yeah, that's going to do it. And it absolutely did, which is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if anyone wants to say in the chat if they identify with any of these types or they recognize any of these behaviors, if anyone wants to say.
Yeah, that's what we normally just use the chat because it's that little bit easier than people having to turn on cameras and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly,
if you
exactly.
want to say in there.
Mm.
I
I'll
think
give.
I can definitely recognize people in all those categories, and
Mm,
there's the over deliverer and the white knucklers are definitely,
mm,
I would say, prevalent in the law.
in law.
Oh, there we
Yeah.
go. Yeah, someone saying, yeah, probable white knuckler. Yeah, so I think
Yep.
there's
Yep.
probably a few of them in law, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, that was my guess. Over deliverers and white knucklers were probably what I would see most represented. Though I have had some
Mm.
spin cyclers, but like I said, they tend to be people who for whom law was just is just one of their many many careers.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so if we think of these as avoidance styles, um, I think you can already start to see that um, that I think about avoidance as being motivated by something, right? Clara and I were talking about this a little bit before the call, that avoidance has content, right? There is meaning to what we cannot do. And that's one of the reasons that I don't tend to use the term procrastination much, though I did just say it a couple of minutes ago. And that's because I think we associate procrastination mostly with external deadlines, things we have to do. And then I think along with that, we tend to think about why it's not happening on a very general kind of human level, like, oh, well, the lizard brain just wants to lay on the couch, or, it's always easier to do something, there's always something easier to do, or, this
Mm.
kind of general human tendencies to, want to have pleasure instead of pain, right?
Sure.
And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not like that's not operative, but I think when you're dealing with like persistent avoidance, usually, well, or what I want to foreground by using avoidance instead is that, like I said it just a couple of minutes ago, when you're dealing with persistent avoidance, it's not because of an external deadline. It's because you want something that is also a problem for you in some way. So I want to be us to be able to like focus on that internal friction point, right? Rather than the idea like, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this for this outside deadline and I keep not doing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's your issues that are getting in the way rather than other issues. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that when you're dealing with persistent avoidance, it can be really painful. There's a lot of people who often come to me like in a lot of suffering, and it's because fighting yourself is a painful experience, right? If it was just
Mm.
that you resented some outside deadline, that would be less tormenting. But,
Mm.
waking up every
Mm.
day and going, I know I want to do this. Today will be the day. And then 8 p.m. comes around and you still haven't done it.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
that kind of war with yourself really, frankly, sucks, right?
Sure. Totally.
um, yeah. So, yeah, so that's why I don't use the word procrastination. That's why I like to think about avoidance so that we can focus on that internal friction point. And in order to start to shift this, I mean, there are very thorough things that I can do in my coaching that actually like remove the problem at the base. But even without that, you can get a lot more traction using different tools than what we tend to kind of default to.
Mm.
So the first thing I wanted to go through is shifting from what I think of as the judgment paradigm to the paradigm of judgment to the investigation paradigm. And the reason I think about it this way is because most of how we naturally react to avoidance when we see it in ourselves is judgment, right? Like just think about some things, like imagine you've there's a deadline coming up and you think, ideally you would have begun it on Monday and now it's Thursday afternoon. What are some
Mm.
of the things you would say to yourself? If anyone's willing to share in the chat, I'd be curious. Um,
I know I would straight away be saying, that's my failure. I should have
My
done that. Yeah,
failure, I should have
definitely.
done that.
Mm.
Yep.
Why didn't
Um,
I? Yeah, yeah.
what's wrong with me?
Mm.
Um, uh, yeah, I always do this. So and so already probably started. You know,
Comparison, yeah.
yeah, Bill down the hall already finished his presentation, etc. Okay, so there's a couple of things to notice about the judgment paradigm. The first one is that thinking those things does not feel good. So if you just think, if you tune into the sensations in your body and you think, I should have already started this, or I should have already finished this, how does that feel when you think that?
It's not good, is it? It's you do feel I was thinking frustrated, but you do feel like failing as well, don't you? I think that's
Yeah,
definitely all in that re realm.
yeah. And like physically, I feel a kind of almost like a sinking, like, oh.
Mm, mm, yeah,
Yeah. So uh, we think that telling ourselves making these,
overwhelm has been said as well, and
oh,
I think yeah,
overwhelm. Yes.
overwhelm
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. I think that we think that for whatever reason, humans believe, like we seem to default to believing that saying mean things to ourselves will be motivating. But that sensation of, like when you feel that way, do you think, you know what I really want to do now is start something hard that I already feel behind on?
Yeah, it's almost the exact opposite
It's the
impetus. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
exact opposite. So,
yeah.
and I think that this is a feedback loop too, right? So the later we get, the more we yell at ourselves, the worse we feel, the later we get.
Mm, mm, yeah.
So this is the judgment paradigm, and it is so useless. Um, it's like I feel like it's one of the things that I mean, I don't spend the most time doing, but there is like a portion of working with people that for me always involves, finding a way to show people that the inner kind of mean voice is not helping them,
Mm,
because
mm,
it's particularly if you feel like you've been letting yourself down for a while, it's hard to let go of. It can feel like that mean voice is the only thing keeping you on the straight and narrow,
mm, mm.
right? Um, because like, well, if I don't yell at myself, what if it gets worse? Like, what if I just lay on the couch and eat Doritos for the rest of my life? Like, what if I do nothing?
Yeah, so I suppose in a strange way, it's trying to motivate yourself, but through like the most kind of beating with a stick method rather than carrot method sort of thing. Yeah,
Exactly. And sometimes one of the things that helps people is just to think, would you, if you wanted your kid to do something, is this how you would get them to do it? By
sure.
telling
Yeah,
them
yeah.
every day how terrible they are. Do you think that would work?
Yeah, it doesn't
Like,
feel like a good parenting technique,
yeah,
does
like,
it?
would you train your dog this way?
Yeah, yeah.
No. So that can be helpful. Um, and the other thing that this kind of approach does, the judgment approach, is it keeps us from asking any questions about the avoidance. So if I'm, you know, let's say I have a meeting with a student, I need to read their chapter and I keep not doing it, right? If I'm in the judgment paradigm and I'm just like, God, why don't you ever do anything? What's wrong with you? You're so lazy, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to ask myself why I'm not reading the chapter, because the judgment paradigm kind of comes with a built-in reason.
Mm, mm. The reason is you, sort of thing, rather
Yes,
than there can't be
exactly.
another reason. You've answered
Yeah,
your question in terms of the
yeah,
reason.
exactly. The reason is a given, right? I'm bad, that's why it's not happening. So you
Mm,
don't the judgment paradigm also keeps you from looking further.
mm,
And
mm.
sometimes once you start looking, it's not that difficult to find the actual problem. So let's say I start out thinking, oh, I'm a bad supervisor. I'm so lazy. I should be thinking more about my students. And then if I'm able to pause and say, okay, well, why might I be avoiding this? And then I think, Oh, I'm worried I gave her bad advice about that last chapter, and it's coming home to roost now. I could have made a mistake. Well,
Mm-mm.
that's something I can actually invest. Is that true? If it is
Mm.
true, what could I do about it? Right? It's so much more fruitful than just telling myself the same mean things over and over. It just doesn't get us anywhere. Um,
Yeah,
okay, so shall we do a little practice exercise?
sure.
Okay, so this is basically a way to take yourself through. Um, oh, hold on. I'm gonna have to restart this. Hold on one second.
That's okay.
Okay, so I call this exercise good, bad, yes, no. And can you see me typing?
Yep.
Okay, so this is basically a little cheat sheet for switching from the investigation or switching from the judgment paradigm to the investigation paradigm. You can do it just with these two little squares.
Hmm.
So um, you start out with the thing that you are trying to do. So let's pick something. Is there something you need to do, Clara?
Well, I was thinking what would be relevant would be for me, like in careers, it is sort
Yes.
of look around for a new job.
Okay.
I
Yes,
feel like I
absolutely.
might
Okay.
like to look around for a new job, but I'm not doing it.
Okay. Yes, excellent. So the first one is, how would you get to see yourself if you did this thing? So in what ways would you be good if you did this thing?
It's normally around things like achieving career,
Yep,
you know,
achieving career success.
career success or development.
Yep, fulfilling my
Norm,
potential.
yeah, yeah, and
What do you?
say overcoming. For me, there's often things like, oh, whether it's a long commute or it's a
Yeah.
specialism that isn't being fulfilled. So it's overcoming sort of problems in a current role, sort of thing.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so yeah.
Yep. And so I guess if you are able to do those things, you probably see yourself as sort of like resourceful, re- uh,
You're maximizing your potential, aren't you? I think that's the
yeah,
real key. I think people don't like
yep,
to, waste, especially in law, waste the training,
mm-hmm,
waste the time, the effort, and everything that they've put in so
yes,
far.
not wasteful, yep. So you'd be resourceful, not wasteful, successful, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if you get the right job, you'll be successful.
Hmm.
Okay. And then the second square, we're going to look at how are the ways that you see yourself as bad for not doing the thing? How do you
Um,
judge yourself
I
for
guess
not
it's
doing it?
it's being stuck, isn't it? I think lots of
Mm,
people come to me when they feel stuck, that they're putting up
mm,
with things. Maybe a boss is their thoughts are dominating over
mm,
over the individual's thoughts, that they're being sort of
yes.
railroaded almost into things and put upon in their
Mm.
current job.
And so, how would they judge themselves for that? Do they see themselves when they're not taking action despite that? Do they think they're being weak? Do they think they're being fearful, lazy? Like, what's the
Yeah,
judgment?
I would definitely say fearful and weak. I think people can
Mm,
feel that they don't stand up to
yep,
people at work in the way that they could or should maybe, or that
yep,
they just don't assert themselves enough, that they're being, yeah, lacking in assertion,
yep,
sort of
yep,
letting things happen to them rather than taking control, maybe lack of control, yeah.
yeah, yeah, lack of control. Yep. And then if they're consistently
A,
putting this stuff
a
on the oh
failure, someone's added in a
yes,
failure, so yeah.
yes, exactly. And if you're consistently go on LinkedIn and post about jobs or whatever, and you're not doing it, then you're also going to add those judgments about, I can't manage my time. I don't do I don't keep my word to myself. So you add in those kind of judgments about like promising and not delivering as
Mm-mm.
well.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I sort of
absolutely.
let myself down.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That you're not taking control, isn't it? And that sort of thing again. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay. So, um, I'm gonna take out some of these that seem less like judgments to me.
Okie doke. Just added in
Yeah,
seeing yourself as passive.
yes,
So I guess the
yes,
opposite of assertive, isn't it? Yeah.
yep, yep. Um, and I think I'm not sure if there's a word for it, but it's sort of like not a go-getter.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Drifting. I think some people feel they drift in
Drifting.
their careers rather
Yep.
than, yeah, go-getting being the opposite sort of thing, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So these are the kinds of things that this is the kind of dialogue that we are usually in, right? So we're
Mm-mm.
saying the stuff that's in the upper right, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Oh, so and so keeps, she's moving up the ranks. I'm just drifting, right? Like, why can't
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I should put myself out there more. I should be braver, all of that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
then we think, well, if I could just do this and, you know, get the new job, then I'd get to feel like I'm fulfilling my potential, like I
Yeah.
haven't wasted my degree. So we tell ourselves all these bad things and then we say, well, I'll get to believe the good things when I get over there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, telling ourselves all the bad things is pushing our ability to get to the good things further away,
Hmm.
right? Because it's shrinking us basically. Okay, so the idea is to set this aside, to start to look at the situation from outside of this judgment paradigm and start to look for that content that's gotten us here in the first place.
Mm-mm.
So the way that we do that is we're going to fill out the second row, but we are not going to use anything from the first row in the second
Okay.
row. So now we're going to ask, why am I a yes to this? And you can also just think of it as like, why do I want this for myself?
Okay.
And then, why am I a no?
Mm.
Why do I not want this for myself? Okay. So, and I think that some of those things that you were saying about like I want to maximize my potential, I want a job closer to me, closer to my house.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I want a boss who believes in my potential, whatever.
Yeah. Or to achieve your career objectives or
Yes. Not
use your specialism or whatever it is that's, yeah.
yes. Yes. And it's really important to notice how much more concrete we get as soon as we get to what do I want from this? And
Okay.
it becomes much easier to actually evaluate, right? So I want to reach my potential. Our brains are capable of telling us forever that that has not yet happened because it's very unspecific, right? If you have a mean
Sure.
brain that
Yeah.
wants to
Yeah.
say mean things, it will always find some more potential. Whereas if you say, I want to use my specialism,
Mm, mm.
this is something you can prove you've done, right? I have switched to using my specialism,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's important about making it once is that it's very difficult for to argue with what you want.
Mm,
Um, someone can say that you shouldn't want something, but they can't say that you don't want it. Like
mm,
only you
mm.
know if you want something.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. If you say you want something closer to home, that's a you thing, isn't it? Or if you want more money or whatever it is, then
Yeah,
that's a fact.
it's a fact.
It's
Yeah,
not
it
something that
can't.
anyone else can change, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not something that anyone else can like cast doubt on, right?
Mm, mm,
And that gives you something kind of certain to stand in, I think, which is important.
mm.
Okay. I want to use my specialism. Let's just do one more, like maybe oh, you said I want to make more money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So, and then why am I a no? Why do I not want this for myself? And this is the most important square. This is the juicy square.
So this is why I'm going to get into double negatives if I'm not careful. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you don't,
This is why we're looking for the thing in you that is keeping you from opening up LinkedIn that day and looking to see what jobs are there. There's something, as much as you want, there's something that's like, no, we
oh,
don't want
okay.
it.
Right, right. Oh, okay. Yeah. So these are the things that are getting in your way, which is
Yes,
sometimes with people that I speak to is confidence in yourself.
yes,
Maybe often it can be as simple as not being confident drafting a CV,
yep.
not wanting to go to an interview because I haven't been to interview for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's things like that,
Yep.
which can be
Yes.
quite big issues, even when,
Yep.
someone is very senior and all this kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
those issues it's being out of your comfort zone
Yeah.
because you're in your comfort zone in your current job.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
it's a
Yep.
change, it's different.
Yep. I think sometimes there can be, I think with any job search, a kind of, a fear of finding something out about how you measure up, in a different
Yeah,
pond or a bigger
being
pond.
told you're not good enough. People,
Yep.
people don't
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Dealing with rejection,
Yeah,
very lucky
someone.
people encounter zero rejection in a job search.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Someone said the so-called potential might just be a lie. That I
Yes.
guess that's sort of a being found out almost, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah. And I really like the things that you've come up with. Obviously, you are an expert here in terms of like what brings people, to feel stalled in a job search. Because they're so like the yeses, they're so concrete, right?
Mm,
And
mm.
and that really gives you something to work with. So if you had just said not being confident, again, it's like, how do we solve for that? Right?
Sure, yeah,
It's
it's very
it's
broad.
like what yeah, it's very broad and it can feel almost like a character trait rather than a problem.
Mm,
Whereas I'm not confident in my CV writing abilities.
mm,
That's
mm.
solvable, right? Like that has handles.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Okay. Now the other thing is look at how much more useful. Oops. I wanted to actually make that smaller. Can I do that? Yeah. Look at how much more useful the no list is than the bad list,
Mm, mm.
right?
Yeah, the bad is, like you say, no handles on it, to use your expression. It's
Yeah,
very broad, it's very
exactly.
fluffy, it's just a general negativity,
Yeah, it's just
which,
it's just like I suck, put it on my tombstone. Like that's how things are going to be.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the no actually gives you something to work with. And I think it also, and like I have never really like it's very popular to preach self-compassion, and I've never really understood exactly how to do that in the abstract. But when I look at that chart, when I look at the yeses and the nos, I can see, like when I'm doing this for myself, I can see, oh, I'm just afraid, or
Mm,
this just
mm,
feels really high stakes. And
mm,
just having some compassion for your own avoidance gives you so much more wiggle room to work with it than when you're
mm,
stuck in just fighting it. Right.
mm.
So that's the other reason I like the yes no is that like both the yeses and the nos are reasonable.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
both they're completely legitimate. You're stuck because you want two different things for legitimate reasons.
Mm, mm,
And then you get to look at, what if I really think that I want the yes to win out, what on the no side can I start to dislodge? What can I work with?
it's almost a action plan, isn't it?
Yeah,
Of issues
exactly.
to address. It's like, well,
Yeah.
let's get some of these no's
Yeah,
down.
exactly. What's
Yeah.
you can start with the easiest. Sometimes people start with the one that feels the most charged because they want to get rid of it.
Mm,
Sometimes people want to, okay, well, the thing that feels the least scary is this,
mm.
so let's deal with that. My friend Samantha is good with CVs. Let's give her a call or whatever, just to start one thing. So
Mm-mm.
if you do this for yourself, for people on the call, or for you, Clara, that's what I would do after you have the list, is I would look at the no's and I would pick a couple of them to work with. You can even just start with one. So, and if it's like a skill issue, like in our list, so not being confident in drafting a CV, that's something you could problem solve for, right? If it's a fear of being told you're not good enough or afraid of dealing with rejection, um, you can look for counter evidence to this reading. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, I got through rejection to get this job. What if I can handle it? You
Yeah.
know?
In fact, I don't know any lawyers that haven't got through rejection to
Yeah,
get qualified,
exactly.
actually.
Exactly.
So you
Yeah.
really don't get
Um,
qualified without.
yeah. Okay, someone might tell me I'm not good enough. Does that mean they're right? Do I have to believe that? What is the evidence I have that I am good enough? And
Mm,
none of these things are like a magic bullet that stops your brain from presenting these, but it gives you the distance. It allows you to not just take them as your reality and just move forward with them. Like, yes, I can't do it because I'll be rejected, and that's it, I'm stuck.
mm,
Um,
mm,
So that is one of the major things I wanted to share today, just like moving from judgment to investigation.
mm,
So rather than I'd be good if only I could and I'm bad because I can't, why do I want it? Why do I not want it? Like, assume that there is a logic to your avoidance. Y'all are lawyers, so
mm,
you are looking for the logic, right? Your brain is making a pro argument and a con argument. And
mm.
if you find them, you've got handles. There's stuff to start to work with. Yeah.
Definitely,
Um,
definitely.
okay. So, I mean, there's more I can say, but I've just kind of talked on for quite a bit. It's like
I
40
mean,
minutes after. So,
yeah, yeah. I think it's such a great way of looking at it and such a good tool to use because, like
mm,
you say, it brings it out of the abstract fear kind of, and brings it just down to something a bit more, say, actionable or straightforward. And even if it is
yeah,
something like you say, being told you're not good enough, or what if my potential is a lie, those sorts of issues, they may be harder to deal with, but at least if you identify them, then it's like, okay, well, you can, there's lots of stuff around imposter syndrome these days, isn't there?
yeah,
So if you feel that your
exactly.
potential is a lie, then explore imposter syndrome as a
Yeah,
concept and
there's
see
places you
how.
can go. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and I think just normalizing, you know, the normalizing that when it comes to actions that emotionally feel like a big risk, but also promise a big gain
Mm, mm,
because they are something we really want, it makes complete sense that people get stuck in avoidance
mm,
because our desire to do it and our fear of doing it are sort of constantly edging one another out, right? So it can feel like a kind of demonic possession when you keep deciding to do something and then somehow you don't do it, but it actually makes complete sense,
mm,
right?
mm.
We
It
are,
is it's that
yeah,
weighing up, isn't it, in your mind? I
yeah,
was just going to say, someone said, so like working a strategy out of this will gain traction, and then presumably it's a question of small steps every day kind of
yes.
thing.
Small steps every day, and and when you think small steps, like think of what you think is a small step and then like make it way smaller.
Okay. Top tip.
um, because um, when you come up with a small step, the first thing your brain is going to do is say, "Oh God, that's nothing. That'll never get us anywhere." And then if you persist and you're like, "No, we're just going to do 10 minutes." When it comes to doing the 10 minutes, your brain will completely flip over and go like, "No, we can't. It's too hard." Right? So it's going to believe both that it'll never get you anywhere because it's too small and it's impossible to do and you can't do it. So you want to start with a step that is small enough that when your brain says, "Oh no, it's too hard," you feel like laughing. Like,
Okay.
seriously? Seriously, we can't think about maybe calling someone in the shower. Like, we can't do that. We can't send one email. We can't, so
Yeah,
like
yeah.
lower the bar because we were talking about that kind of snowball that happens where you don't do it, so you yell at yourself and then you feel worse. The worse you
Mm-mm.
feel, the harder it is. And so you want to start building the little positive snowball where
Mm,
you do something,
yeah.
you get a little dopamine hit of like, hey, I finished that. And then the next thing's a little bit easier and then a little bit easier.
Mm-mm. So yeah, it's literally snowballing it in the other direction, sort
Yes,
of thing, rather
exactly.
than yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And because if you've been stuck in persistent avoidance for a while, your brain, you've probably worn some pretty strong grooves in telling yourself that you're bad. It'll take a little bit of practice.
Mm-mm.
Um, to you need to start building up positive evidence for yourself so you can be more reassuring and less mean.
And do you recommend to people that they write this down, sort of, because like you say, with the positive, we could all look back through our lives and pick out some positives, but we could probably all look back through our lives and pick out some things we've done wrong as well.
Oh
And one
yeah,
might be
absolutely.
easier than the other. So
Yeah,
would you do you recommend sort of, I guess, doing this exercise on paper and then keeping like a paper
yeah,
proof of what you've done?
absolutely keep it on paper. It's very easy for smart people to do things in their heads, and I completely get the impulse, but in our heads is that's where the shenanigans are happening, right? Like, but when you get it on paper, you have the chance to see what your brain is doing.
Mm,
Um, so I do think it's really important to get it on paper or in your notes app or leave yourself a voice note, whatever works for you. And um, I mean, one practice I recommend, like let's say you were working on believing. Let me look at one of our, actually, I can stop sharing this now, probably. Let's say you were working on believing, I can't deal with rejection. You're working on challenging that belief that I
mm,
can't deal with
mm,
rejection. Um, you can look for three pieces of evidence every day for the new thought. So let's say your new thought is rejection's part of the process and I can handle it.
mm, mm,
And then you would find, okay, well, I applied to law programs. I did this. So you build up evidence for yourself to help you believe the new thought.
mm, mm.
Um, and that's something that I find really useful to do every day. And if you have a friend you're close enough to share this kind of stuff with, texting each other your little lists is a great way to do this with someone and have accountability. I've done this
Mm.
with friends in a little WhatsApp chat where we share our evidence every day for whatever thought we're working on believing.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and there's something about the practice of looking for proof that helps your brain shift into holding that thought rather than just
Mm.
saying it over and over or something. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is something. But also don't my old coach used to say team no streaks, that we are team no streaks, right? So if you do it for 3 days and then you don't do it for 3 weeks, who cares? A streak is not important.
Okay.
Just pick it up
Just doing
again.
it.
So
Yeah, yeah,
don't let
yeah.
your brain get hung up on, oh, I have to do it every day or it's not gonna. No,
Yeah,
no
yeah, yeah.
streaks. Streaks don't matter. Do it
Just do
whenever.
it. Just do it.
Yeah, you don't have to do it in the morning. You don't have to do it like after meditating, like none of that stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay, no, fine, fine. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to just pop them in the chat about anything that you'd just like to
yes,
ask.
and I
Say
can
now's your
say
chance.
I will put in my
Oh, the little quiz that you said about.
yes. th-
Fabulous. Yeah, that would
This
be
is
great.
that's the URL for the quiz. I think. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so if you take that, there we go, that's an actual link. You'll
Brilliant.
you'll get via email like a little guide specifically for investigating more your avoidance type. So it gives you like
Okay.
a more targeted way to drill down into your like no square, like why
Mm-hmm.
your brain is saying no to whatever it is, that is designed for your specific type. And then if you stay on my list, you also get after that this free mini course, which is similar
Okay.
to some of the stuff that I've taught today, but in more
Mm-hmm.
detail. And I go through examples from like clients um,
Mm-hmm.
and how, basically like what we found when we really started looking about why they couldn't do certain things.
Okay. And do you find then, two questions, does
Hmm.
everyone have an avoidance type?
Mm.
Is there anyone that doesn't avoid
Yes, such a
things?
good question. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
I
What's
was
the
going to
other
say,
question?
and then the second one is, do you tend to have, I assume that you can be a mix of avoidance types, but you would have one dominant
Absolutely.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did my best to kind of, I'm not a social scientist, so my my ability to, create a pinpoint precision quiz was sort of hampered by
Sure.
my background. But yes, some people are mixes of different styles. I think that to me, the thing that is the most telling, so if I was trying to decide in what way to approach someone based on their type, I would
Mm,
ask them what they do when they're avoiding something. I think
okay.
that that tells us a lot. Like
Mm,
white
mm,
knucklers, for example, tend to just completely check out because they're so stressed all the time that when they're avoiding, they're just like prone, right?
right.
Whereas like over deliverers are like,
You
building
can.
new vegetable beds or whatever the fuck, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Coming up with another task to keep them busy. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah. Um, I do think that everybody avoids some things. I think that where the kind of people that I coach and the like smart driven people, why we tend to present with this more, I think is because we wound up um, we have skills we really want to use and we really want to put our potential into the world. We really want to do the biggest things we're capable of.
Mm,
And because of a variety of factors, that same set of behaviors feels very charged and, sort of emotionally fraught.
mm.
If I'd been able to draw, I would have drawn a little picture of this. But, if I think um, that I can't, that like being a great writer is the
Mm.
best thing about me, that is going to make it imperative that I finish X writing project and also absolutely terrifying to embark on it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a little bit like, yes, if you're being a solicitor is
Core to your identity,
almost all of everything that you, yeah, 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 then you can't
then
fail in that because it would be such a
yes.
massive failure if you, yeah, yeah, okay. No, I
Yeah, so
totally
it's
see what you
like
mean.
I have to keep going on this path. This is the path, but also I'm constantly afraid I'm going to be ejected from the path in some
Mm,
way.
mm,
Yeah. So the risk, and I think that that tends to happen when you grow up being good at things. A lot of stuff gets braided together with being
mm,
smart, being competent, you
mm,
know,
mm.
um, being top of the class, whatever it is. We put a lot of emotional weight on those things. And so that's where the avoidance comes out. Other people just have different, all of their crap comes out in their relationships, or they always have a boss that they're fighting with, or they always
Mm,
wind up in a war with their neighbors, or, whatever. Like other people just play out their issues in their own, in different ways. But I think that for people who are ambitious, our ambition often carries this kind of sense of danger
mm, mm.
that
Yeah.
makes the yes no, like you could even see it in the little exercise we did, like yes I want to fulfill my potential, and no, like what if I find out there is none, right?
Y- Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that makes
I
the
think it's
stakes high.
so common in the
Yeah,
legal world. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Fabulous.
Okay,
That's so
well,
interesting,
thanks
so
everyone for
interesting.
coming. Yes,
Yes,
and I appreciate everyone staying and listening and your comments. And Clara, thank you for a fabulous interview.
you're
It was a
most
great
welcome. You're most
conversation.
welcome. Definitely,
Yep.
definitely. I think that's just so interesting, and it's so interesting to sort of break it down because absolutely we get stuck in this stuff, just
Yeah.
going
Oh yeah.
round in our own circles,
Yeah.
and really we do get nowhere. So having
And
any method, like you said, of moving out of the judgment into the investigation, it moves it
yeah.
forward, and that's all we're
And
looking to achieve, isn't it?
yeah, and I think it's just so important to see that this is a common occurrence, because that's the other thing about persistent avoidance is it's very lonely, right? You're
Mm,
fighting
mm,
yourself. And
Mm.
it's necessarily a kind of isolated battle. And so just getting together with other people who are like, oh shit, I can't get out of my bathrobe either, or whatever, it's like really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. You're not alone. You're not
You are
unique. It's
not
not a you
alone.
problem.
Yeah, it's
It's
not a you
yeah,
problem, it's a
yeah.
human brain problem. So
Fantastic,
anyway, all
fantastic. Well,
right.
thank you so much for all
Yes,
your
thank
insight and for
you.
coming along today,
Yep, thanks
everyone.
everyone for coming.
We're getting some really positive messages, so
Oh,
that's
good.
great.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks a lot.
Bye
Bye.
bye.